Good afternoon, friends. Happy Wednesday. I wanted to discuss with you guys a question that I get quite often on the channel. I've been receiving it for about 3 or 4 months now. I think that long-term viewers of the channel know my view on the subject because I discuss it sometimes in my podcasts and offhand comments here and there, but I've never done a dedicated video discussing how I approach the subject. So I thought maybe getting all these comments the last few months, I should make a video addressing it now before we eventually get to doing a comprehensive series on dopamine. So the question is about a common occurrence that people have in both depression, anxiety, and minor mental disorders, as well as among people especially who use hedonistic drugs. And that is the feeling that they no longer can feel happiness. So if you've never experienced this feeling, what it feels like, and it's called, by the way, anhedonia. Hedonism is the pursuit of pleasure, anhedonia is the lack of pleasure. So the feeling, by the way, is sort of like this. So imagine that every morning when you drink your coffee, you get a little bit of a nice mood, a buzz, elevation in the morning. Well, what'll happen is if you have an anhedonia, when you drink your coffee, that elevation just won't happen. So you'll notice that and be surprised, okay, why is this coffee not affecting me the same way as before? That'll happen, or for example, you'll do other dopaminergic activities that are more direct than coffee, like sex or even eating food you like or something like that, and you won't enjoy it. Or you may find that life is missing a little bit of that, of the excitement and motivation and drive that it once had. If you're a drug addict, you may notice specifically that drugs stop working for you. You stop getting high specifically. So all of these things actually often, not always, but often have a central cause. So I want to talk to you guys about that cause as well as how I have approached and how I do approach dealing with it in my own life and in other people's lives. So first of all, I want you guys to know something very clearly. Most of the questions I get are from people saying, how can I heal the brain from anhedonia, in terms of they think that they have damaged their brains and that they need to heal their brain from brain damage. So people are often looking at drugs that may be able to regenerate dopaminergic neurons. That means neurons that produce, synthesize, or deal with dopamine, usually synthesize. But I don't believe that this is the right approach. Specifically, think of it this way. They're thinking that I've actually either used drugs or whatever so much that I've damaged my brain cells and they can't synthesize dopamine anymore. I don't think that this is the case. The reason why is that if you look at, for example, a disease in which truly people have low amounts of dopamine, which is Parkinson's disease, they don't develop symptoms of the disease until they've lost about 70% of the neurons in their brain that produce dopamine. So a majority, you have to lose most of the neurons before you see any result. And it's not such that Parkinson's, they are known, like, I know they get motor symptoms mainly at the 70%, but it's not like they start getting anxiety and depression and anhedonia very clearly much earlier. So it's not that losing a little bit of dopaminergic neurons necessarily will make you have more anhedonia. Now, to be honest with you, in my personal experience, having had brain damage personally and so on, I do think it will change the way you experience pleasure. But it's not usually the main cause that people are thinking. It's not brain damage that's causing this. What it is this. Dopamine, among all the hormones in the brain, is a neurotoxin. It can kill cells. That's because it's excitatory. There's something in the brain called excitotoxicity. Because of that reason, the brain doesn't like too much dopamine. So if you are experiencing an amount of dopamine that your brain, every brain is different, that your brain thinks it shouldn't handle, it will downregulate the receptors on cells for dopamine so that you won't even feel the dopamine you're synthesizing. It'll also probably, although I don't have as much academic evidence for this, downregulate the synthesis of dopamine. I haven't looked into that as much personally, to be honest with you, academically, but I felt it personally. So it'll do those two things. So that's where you can go use a drug, but the receptors are downregulated, so you won't feel the dopamine. Or you could go meet somebody you like that you would normally feel happy about meeting, but you won't feel happy because you've just abused your system. The solution isn't to try to regrow neurons. You don't have a low amount of cells. The solution is to get the cells to upregulate the receptor for dopamine so they can feel it. And also potentially, you could, by the way, I'm not going to mention this in this discussion, but you could temporarily be out of the actual nutrients to synthesize dopamine, in which case you could supplement L-tyrosine, for example, and that would work. But generally, it's the receptors downregulate. So how do you deal with this? The first step is to starve to some degree. By the way, this is all exaggerated. You're not really starving. But to desensitize your brain from dopamine a little bit by changing your lifestyle. So for example, for me, I immediately quit music whenever this happens. For me personally, music really affects my emotions, my happiness. I love music, it makes me very happy. So if I quit music, it makes me far more sensitive and calmer to dopaminergic events in my life. So for example, right now I don't listen to music. You usually don't listen to music, very rarely. It makes me more sensitive to everything. I learned this actually by accident and something I experienced in life. You can also, for example, quit TV for a while. I've done that before. You can quit sugary foods. Certainly you can quit drugs. You can do things like that for a period of time. In addition, you can make this super physiologic by using PEDs. Specifically, the PED of choice, I think, in my experience, is quetiapine, which is also called Seroquel. There are many dopamine receptor antagonists. I love Seroquel. My personal experience with it is that it is the most innocuous antipsychotic I've tried, and I've tried a lot of them. I've tried Thorazine, haloperidol. I mean, I've tried most of the common ones, and Seroquel is the most innocuous in my opinion. Basically, what that drug does is it blocks dopamine receptors, and it blocks a lot of other receptors in the brain. It slows everything down, so it makes you more sensitive by definition. Which is also why long-term use of antipsychotics can make your brain actually get smaller, because it blocks all these receptors, and neurogenesis, the creation of new brain cells, doesn't happen if all the receptors are blocked. So anyway, it can really make you resensitized. I've used it tremendously in my life. So I've used it also with some clients for a week, for example, low dose like 50 milligrams to 100 milligrams of Seroquel at night under a doctor's supervision, up to 300 milligrams at night, or even twice a day. You could do it more than a week. You could do it up to 6 months just to resensitize. I'm not talking about if you have any schizophrenic or bipolar disorder. I'm just talking about resensitizing. So you can starve yourself of dopaminergic activities, and then you can actually block the receptors and just wait a little while, and those things will upregulate. And you can make them upregulate faster, by the way, by adding HDAC inhibitors, histone deacetylase inhibitors, like sirtuins, like sodium butyrate, like sodium valproate. And then once they have upregulated a little bit, even if you don't feel it, when you're done with it, you stop for a while. Stop specifically the antipsychotics. Stop Seroquel specifically, because neurogenesis will not occur very well if you're blocking receptors. So stop Seroquel for at least a week or a week and a half. And then what I would do personally is do a 5-day regimen of cerebrolysin, which you can get from Cosmic Nootropic with the discount code LEO. By the way, I don't make money off that. I just use it for my own cerebrolysin from the same website. But you can use 5 milliliters of cerebrolysin to 10 milliliters of cerebrolysin for 3 to 5 days, say, just to upregulate tremendously neurogenesis in your brain, to allow your brain to be a bit more flexible. Hoping that flexibility, in addition, and you keep the HDAC inhibitors going, will allow your brain to re-upregulate the dopamine receptors as much as possible. I've noticed that having enhanced neurogenesis helps this, but unfortunately the main psychiatric methods to enhance neurogenesis, which are via antidepressants, most of them will inhibit some dopaminergic activity. So it's not the way to go about it, because serotonin inhibits some dopaminergic activity. So basically one of the only options is cerebrolysin. So basically, again, to summarize, you remove the dopaminergic activities from your life. I block the dopamine receptors with something like Seroquel. I use HDAC inhibitors and Seroquel for a period of time. Then I remove Seroquel, keep the HDAC inhibitors for a bit, and use a dose of cerebrolysin and wait. And maybe if that didn't work, I would use another dose the next month and wait. And in reality, it'll work quite quickly. Sometimes, the longest I've ever taken to recover from anhedonia was 2 years. But it almost always happens. And by the way, guys, for those of you that are still worried that you've committed brain damage from your drug use and so on, what brain damage looks like, I'm trying to think of the rock star in mind right now, and I can't think of him, and it's a little embarrassing, but there's a British rock star with he's a brunette, he has long hair. And he has a show with his wife. You guys probably know what I'm talking about. Someone can comment in the comment section down below. You can see that he can't hear well. That's brain damage in his ears. The cells in the ears are made similar to the cells in the brain. He has brain damage. He can't respond well. He can't enunciate well. All of that sort of comes along with severe brain damage. In his case, most likely it's from drug use. You can see that with some rock stars. Often the drummers and people like that will have that. That's how the brain damage looks. If you just feel anhedonia, it's most likely a receptor downregulation or less transmission, which is something you can solve if you have enough patience and the right approach. Alright guys, I hope this helps and people will not experiment with too many dangerous drugs in an effort to regain their hedonism, I guess. Have a good day guys, I'll see you soon.